Welcome to this new episode of Unleashed. We continue on the topic of change. We continue on the topic of change management. In the previous episode, we reflected with the guests on the importance of aligning any change, whether it is a digital change, whether it is a business model change like a GCC being set up, the importance of that to be aligned to the business objectives, the importance of that to showcase how it will bring competitiveness to the business. We need the main business to drive it as a critical one so that only when it is strategic to the business, the change can effectively happen. Often, changes which are being brought are not well understood by across the organization. When we are bringing a technology change, whenever we are bringing a digital change, whenever we are implementing a new business model, we tend to go to the end users who are going to put it to use to ask them what they want out of this new technology or new change. They reflect on the need or changes from the context of what they are currently exposed to, from the context of what they are currently doing. They may or may not understand the potential of the technology being brought fully. On the other side, the people who normally drive digital change projects within an organization, which are the IT department or the IT team, may or may not have a full understanding of the business needs. So marrying between a technology potential being brought and understanding, aligning it to the business needs is always a challenge. More so in the modern era where I think it is not retrofitting or improving on the status quo operations, but to bring in transformational changes. Unless one completely understands the potential of what we are bringing, they may end up underutilizing it and retrofitting the current operations into a very sophisticated technology. This has happened many times. In my own experience, I've gone places where they have implemented what they claim to be one of the best ERP implementations. And I had gone back with a business case of, say, in one of the companies, reducing the finance function from 150 people to 25. So even after a successful implementation, there was so much room to improve because the potential of technology and the necessary changes that need to happen around that is limited. So one of the reflections I'll continue to do with my guests, which continue to be Praveena, which continue to be Pankaj and Dan, is to understand how the potential of any technology they are bringing in is fully understood and the potential is fully leveraged by the end users. What kind of processes or what kind of approaches they have taken to engage with the end users to give them insights of what the potential of the changes they are bringing in. The other dimension is to get these stakeholders engaged and buy into the change. Because only when they buy into the change, own the change, that they can put it to full use. Only when they own the change, they will actually get the full value out of it. Again, we reflect with the guests on this podcast on what their experiences of getting stakeholder buy-in, what their experiences of engaging with the stakeholders, and what are the approaches, tips they give to do this. I begin my discussions with Praveena. She shares how she brings in expertise, outside expertise, whether it is people like the influencers like Gartners and so on, who have credibility and have understanding of the best-in-class use cases across the industry. They help her to educate the end users on the potentials of the changes she's bringing in and to therefore contextualize how their businesses can be transformed leveraging the potential of these technologies. Here are my discussions with Praveena.
One of the questions I had is we bring in the trends like technology trends. And I'm just giving from my little experience of implementing technologies at different companies. My role was largely from a bigger picture perspective. So if I go to, let's say, and I'm taking a simple example like a ERP I'm implementing for a large company, and if I go to the accounts receivable department,
Yeah.
and I'll say, this is the ERP variant. What do you want out of that? If I ask so they repeat what they're doing. They'll say, give me outstanding reports by invoice, by customer, by whatever, by region, by product, etc. So I can then, of course, come and retrofit whatever they are doing and give from the new technology the same reports.
Yeah.
Whereas they'll never say, can I use this technology to collect on time?
Yeah.
You should use now, change the objectives, the objective setting, the potential of a technology. People, when they look at, let's say, this, like all these new digital changes which are coming, people ability to, they imagine only from what they are doing today, not from what this is potentially can bring change. How do you marry these two, the potential of this versus not retrofitting what their current problem is? How do you do that and such complex businesses you run? So how do you make them see, you can do your business differently from tomorrow?
So let me make it more generalized first. So that's a very valid question. As to stakeholders are not thinking above and beyond what they already are exposed to. The reason is they don't have time. Keep going back to my original statement. They do multiple jobs, right? So they don't know what they need. So how, as a data person, I need to tell them and let them anticipate or change their behavioral thinking in such or at least they're thinking in such a way that they know what they need, right? So for them we need exposure. So that's the reason, going back to my Figma dashboards. And so here, if I, to be very tactical, we bring expertise. We work with the stakeholders in a requirement session to think different. We also bring outside expertise to make sure that this is what the similar retail companies did.
Potential, best practices elsewhere.
Exactly. You might want to use it, right? So these are the things that there are several ways, right? First, have outside partner talk to you, have Gartners of the world talk to you, have actual use case, go make sure that they go through the use case, have the mock-ups. Better yet, what I'm also trying to do also is, I have a budget, few pennies. I'm going to invest that few pennies in a place where I can democratize this data for them, show them the real example of what it was before and what it is now. So these are the things that I do because, again, people work so many things. So they don't have the bandwidth to think. It's not fair for us to expect too much. However, they have some experiences, right? Don't even think that they don't have it. They do. They want it all. But then, so they're just gonna, in our requirement session, we're gonna gather everything that they want, and we're gonna hone in, and we're gonna put our expertise and change slightly to show things different. So those are the several things that we do.
And I think I like the way you're saying you're bringing in the outside expertise. Perhaps the outside expertise can have the potential to challenge them also if they're limiting themselves in any way. Whereas internally, you probably can't push a user saying you could do better. So then outside expert will always come with the pedigree of saying, I've seen it elsewhere, why don't you do? But,
that's exactly.
So I think that is also helping them to. So there is a net change, big net change, the objective change, the business case change happening as you gather. That's what I'm saying. As you gather the changes, and people are already anticipating the change they're likely to get with this. So there is.
One more thing also that I would also don't go. So the biggest problem, and the problem that I want the listeners to learn from my mistake, what I did was, don't go in there saying that, hey, the current system, you would already have an enterprise data warehouse currently.
Absolutely.
Don't go into that whole world saying that, oh, I'm going to replace your current enterprise data warehouse and I'm going to put this new one. Don't go in there. That was a mistake I did, because people are scared, right? Again, going back, they're busy. They don't have the bandwidth to think something that might change their current life. So go parallel. I know it's expensive, but at least it's worth for the business. Go parallel. And then when people trust the systems, gradually move, but don't just go.
Yeah. So, and I think also to give credit to what they're already doing and saying it's
exactly
improvement.
Exactly. That's a very important point. Don't belittle the current stakeholders, because that's the reason the business is running. Who are you to say that they're doing wrong? So that empathy is very important.
Absolutely. I think that's the right word. I think it's almost like design thinking, what you're bringing, saying empathize, yet bring in more new ways of looking at the business.
Bring in more than what you have, not change the existing. Bring in more.
Absolutely.
Pankaj brings a very different approach. He deals with a much wider organizations, much more multifaceted businesses. So he talks about how he finds champions, he finds pilots, he finds organizations which are willing to champion a new change, build a successful pilot, build a pilot which can be a showcase for others to follow. So what he uses in his large organization, parts of the organization which are willing to experiment, leverage, understand, and put the technology to full use. Using that pilot, the rest of the organization leverage it to their requirements. How easy it is for the old timers in the systems who are probably, this is a very old company as well, an old group. And so old timers who've been making the business decisions, running the thing, for them to get into this kind of a new culture of working in the company, and how do you carry them through this whole process?
So I would say that it's almost like saying you were playing cricket and now I want to make you play baseball because it's a new game, right? So first of all, we have to excite you that baseball is worth learning, right? And not everyone will get excited at the same time. They may be happy. I like cricket. I don't know whether I want to learn this. I don't even know whether I'll be good at it and all of that, right? So that's the usual thing. In anything that we are good at, we don't want to move from one to the other because we are comfortable. Life is good and all of that. So I think hitting that burning platform is important. Now, burning platforms usually come from two sources, fear or greed. Now, fear happens when either you are in a competitive market and in an industry where you are worried that you'll get wiped out, or there are people around you who are like scaring you or whatever, or pushing you. And greed could be that you are a very ambitious person. So I don't care what's happening elsewhere. I want to be this. Now, I would think, and it's a very broad statement to make, the fear in general is less. And the reason I say that is the fear is far higher in some of these digitally agile companies. The competition can come anywhere and wipe you out.
Yeah.
In a largely manufacturing setup where there are big machines, barriers to entry are low, Masayoshi San is not going to pump in billions of dollars to fund your loss-making next competitor, all of those types of things. So in that whole the five forces Porter framework of competition, I think players are in a good position and not going to get disrupted anytime quickly, because I think capital is not easy to come by. So the machineries are a bigger portion of those things rather than the people at a very high level. I'm not saying it's all there. So I think we have to recognize that the nature of the business and the nature of the competition is the one which will either create fear or greed. So the fear in there. So therefore, I think we think that we have to therefore appeal to the greed, which is to say, hey, you know what? We can do better. We can all learn. We are all going to live for the next 20, 30 years. All of us have learned to use UPI. We have learned to use online, many things, use Swiggy, all of that. Why can't we learn some of these things? I mean, we work in office 10 hours a day or whatever number of hours a day. Why can't we make office fun? So I think we are following that approach, given the context that we are in, that there's some interesting stuff happening. And that is where I think you find some early adopters who are ready. You do something there, then you show it to others and they say, wow, those guys seem to be doing something cool. Let me try it out. So that is the approach in our context we are following. I'm not saying this is the best approach, but I think everyone has to figure out what is the motivator that you can create in your context so that people want to try something new.
Now shift to the very critical topic of stakeholder management. And with Dan, we were discussing, if you remember in the previous episode also, the new business model of delivering through a GCC for a global organization. One of the critical aspects he had shared in the previous episode was around why it is important to have a business alignment. In this one, he talks about the approach to stakeholder management. A very transformative change like setting up a GCC for any organization has multiple stakeholders. There are stakeholders who are in the market, who are leveraging this for their cost advantage, they're leveraging this for their competitive advantage. And there are stakeholders in the markets like India who are actually enabling this cost advantage or enabling this competitive advantage by providing services to the parent company. Mapping stakeholders both sides, ensuring that they are involved in the design, redesign, and delivery of this, and their aspirations on both sides are fully addressed is most critical aspect. Dan highlights his experience of managing this stakeholder. I work with the chief technology officer of a company who was bringing in a lot of changes but wasn't carrying the organization through it. They were not aligned.
Right.
Their objectives and this guy's objectives were never aligned. And I think that's where the struggle happened.
Yeah, and that's always an issue. And we as a firm have had that as an issue as well, where the service line or the solution, the services that we offer to our clients are not aligned with the technology platform to best deliver it. So you have the technology that thinks they're working on the greatest, but they're not getting any input from the other technical leaders. And it creates, not only does it not work, but then it builds resentment, right? As investment dollars are going to fund technology solutions that no one knows how to put into the other services that we're offering to profitably elevate growth.
So have you driven any such large technology changes as a part of your...
We have. Yes, we have. Significant. And we're still going through significant because the journey you're not a one and done. It's really continuous. And obviously change management becomes critically important. And so that everybody feels that they are part of moving forward and part of the solution, right? Because if you come up with a solution and I'm not involved and you didn't ask me what I was really looking for, right, that builds resentment. And I may go out of my way to torpedo to make sure you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
And because humans can be petty like that. We know that.
Absolutely.
It really has to do with, right, building as broad a consensus. You're not going to get 100% consensus, but at least broad enough consensus. And we all know that persuasion is all about helping the other person see what's in it for them. And I've got to be able to, and again, it's not just technology, right? That's just persuasion in general, right? I've got to be able to put myself in the other person's shoes and say, okay, how does this work for me? How do I get a betterment out of this? And so you need to think outside of your bias and your perspective and put yourself in the others. And again, especially for a lot of technical leaders, right? It's hard for them to step out, as I think you even note, out of their comfort silo, right? Because that's the way they think, that's the way they talk. And so they do really well with people in their silo. But the question then is, if you want broader support right across the organization, you need to get out of your silo and make sure you understand the other silos and what success looks like for them and how the change that you want to instill is going to help them even be more successful from an efficiency, right? Lower cost of delivery or effectiveness perspective. So but when the two sides aren't talking, and again, the other issue that I would when you look at it from a broad perspective, sometimes people protect their fiefdoms, right? And again, I work with clients in instilling technology that we'd like to place in that, for example, would make their tax department more efficient and effective. Again, then you've got internal controls. To your point, there's a lot of other stakeholders, right? Yeah. Internal control, right? Because it's a public company. Safety, cybersecurity, safety of the system to make sure that putting this is not going to impact any other system they have in place. And so we all know that the easiest answer is no. We don't change, and therefore there's nothing that could be disruptive. Right. But I think a lot of technology leaders need to say, okay, I need to help get to a yes here. And so the question then is, how do I help my internal stakeholders, the other business unit leaders, first of all, understand the myriad of concerns, or at least the things that we need to consider, so that they can actually help me, right, from a technology perspective and all those areas that I'm concerned about. But then I have to work with them to say, okay, I understand, let's figure out how we make this work. And in many companies, you have a lot of people who want to instill technology. And I would say many companies are under-resourced in their technology groups. And so therefore, they don't have enough bandwidth to address everything that the business units would like to do. And I think that's a big issue as well.
I think if I now
extrapolate your experience of building this shared services, what I call as GCC, and you slowly build the confidence. You carried the people through it. You ensured that the customer is safe. You slowly integrated it with the business, all the right steps. So you really essentially you played the huge change management from both sides, carrying this, getting the right team there who appreciate what and working here. How many of your client organizations, when they're doing digital transformations and all those things, have such an anchor to probably see through some changes like this? This again, I find in many organizations not well thought through because they see many things everybody is doing. Why don't I jump into it? But yours seems to be
Yeah,
very well crafted, very structured, and a lot of lessons learned from your journey.
it really did. And part of it is also having the agility to adjust or adapt your changes for success. 'Cause I was given a blueprint of what the people from the US thought would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very task oriented, right? It would be like, Srini, you do the fixed asset depreciation for every engagement.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, okay, first of all, that's not very rewarding for Srini. And he could get really good at doing depreciation, but he's not going to understand the entire client and he's not going to own the client. He's not going to feel responsible for delivering to the client.
Yeah.
So I said, look, we don't do that in the US. Why would we do it here? No, we're going to have a client engagement team and our staff are going to do the same work across the board that a staff person in the US would do. In other words, my mindset and I don't want to say the dream, but my objective was to build the same capabilities at the shared service center that we had in a US office.
Yeah.
And so there was technology that they had licensed and built in that would have tracked these task-oriented things. And that way we could track and schedule based on a task. And I said, no, I don't want to create task people. I want to create client-centric people who are focused and inspired and invested in making sure that we serve our client well. And so that was a change, and there was some resistance, but I think our initial successes help quiet that.
Wow.
That approach. Yeah, and I would say you used one D word, and I'd say that in some cases there's another D word, right? Because you said deployed. I would say in some cases dictated. Right. So it's dictated that this is what you need to do. And this is, and again, without achieving a buy-in or what's in it for me, or how is this going to make my job easier, or how is this going to allow me to be more successful and achieve my career goals and aspirations. And that is a missing link. And if they're not involved with it, they won't be part of the solution. They really won't. And in many cases, it will not be successful because it won't be adapted and become part of the mainstream ethos of how we deliver.
Technology projects or any business model change projects are a long drawn projects. Stakeholders have to be involved from a very early stage and at every stage. So in one of my experiences, I was driving a large project to improve the delivery on time at a customer. Like I had alluded earlier in my previous podcast that we had almost 36 parallel projects going along. At every stage, we didn't want at the end of the 14 months or in 16 months, people to be surprised and say, oh, this is not what I was expecting, or this is not I was prepared for. So involving them at every stage was very critical. So at different milestones or different key points, the stakeholders were involved so that they participate into shaping up the next stages. So if the issues that need to be addressed need to be finalized, it's all the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders is to participate and sign off saying, if these issues are addressed, we are good. If the design has been ready, Then at that stage, the design, every stakeholder was involved, and we used to have healthy discussions around it. And once they have said the design is fine, we used to go to the next stage. Praveena brings this kind of an approach of giving insights of what is coming to the stakeholders at every stage, so that their buy-in, their involvement is ensured, and they are very clear and have their expectations are managed right throughout, and they have a very clear clarity of what they can get once it goes live. She shares her experiences of step-by-step releasing designs, releasing user interfaces to the stakeholders, and ensuring that they have effective buying and transfer of ownership.
How are the users putting to use some of these data, and how are their decision-making processes, or how are we helping them to probably understand what is the potential of what they can do with this? Because it whole thing brings about change, because it's like a domino effect. The moment you bring this quality, the process, the operations, the decision process, everything changes. So how is that being taken care of?
We are right. So for me, I believe, and my whole team believes, that without their blessings, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to approve anything, right? Because that's waste of my money, time, and resources, which are very critical right now as we speak, because of how the world is. So stakeholder management is very important. And going back to the statement that I made, one person does 3 to 4 different jobs, because that's how the whole nature is right now. So they do not have time to think forward or think 300 steps ahead, right? So let's be fair. So don't expect too much from stakeholders, right? But however, what we need to do is we need to make sure we understand the problems. If as a technologist, if I don't understand the problem, if I just deliver whatever I think is right, nobody's going to use it. That's waste of time. Right? So as stakeholder management, change management is very important for me. And that's because of the intensity of this data. Again, going back to my statement that everybody works very hard, they don't have time for it. We have to visualize it. So initially, what we are trying to do is I have a product team too that I work with. And product, every work stream, everybody in data world is very important. Everybody has very important thing that they have to do to come to a decent stop, right? So for this whole job work. So we have a data product. What we do is we actually go UI, UX it. We mock up it. We make sure we put it on Figma. We mock up something that they think that they would like. We take it to our stakeholder. We go through their requirements. We see how it matches up and change our mockups so that they get and they get inspired by what we're doing. Once when the mockup is done, it's just putting the data underneath it and just filling that. Hydrate this model. Hydrate this mockup. That's it. The problem is solved. For me, because we do the work initially, we do the mock-up, people can visualize, especially because they're very busy. Nothing should be drawn. It needs to be visualized. That's how we are tackling right now. But it's a lot of work. Believe me, it's a lot of work. A lot of convincing, not only from stakeholder, but because budget is very important, right? Every penny is important, especially for the retailers, right? Retailers who wants to give back money to the customers. So for that means we don't have the bandwidth to go redo things and waste our money. Every penny that I get is like $1 million for me. So that's the reason everything is very cautiously used, and this is how I do currently right now.
One of the state government managed power sector companies, we are working on improving the commercial operations. We're bringing in operational efficiencies. One of the areas we thought that needs to be addressed is how effectively the transformers are managed. So we worked on building a software, building a database which will understand the performance of the transformers, the quality of the transformers performance, including how often they break, what is the source of supply, what is the quality of repairs, what is the uptime of these transformers, what is the downtime and its impact on the revenue. And we created a very sophisticated analytical system and sophisticated analytical reports that will help the management to probably take calls of which transformers must be up, which transformers should be done, what should be their sourcing strategy, what should be their repairing and upkeep strategy. We had this software ready, we had this solution ready, but then we realized that there is no forum where this data will be reviewed. There is no forum where this data will be seen and decisions will be taken. Largely, transformer-related data was being taken at a section office and maybe by even the linesmen and not by anybody else. The top management had never had a perspective at an overall level of what is working and what is not working. So in order to make this software, this data effective, we have to first introduce forums where this data is seen. We have to train the people to see this data and make decisions. We have to change the processes, how this data is used and decisions are implemented. We have to also create a forum where I think the feedback of those implementations and the effectiveness of those have to be monitored. So we have to bring in a culture of change, cultural change. We have to bring in process change. We have to introduce forums. We have to retrain people for this software to be effective. Pankaj talks about the same aspect of cultural change, etc., in bringing in new technology changes into his company. Here are his reflections. So in your experience, are there handholdings you have to do at different stages, even after the new technology has been introduced, help people to readapt to it? Not just training, just, like it is, suppose tomorrow I give a lot of data from my AI insights from, let's say, from a sales planning, but I'm traditionally used to what I got it in the market. How do I put it to use once I come in, put in front of me? Is a whole lot of change, and it's not a technology answer. It's a way those managements, those leaders are actually able to put. Is there an intervention in a way to hold them and see them through this journey, make mistakes, learn, improve it as they go along? Because the results will only come in maybe in 18 months, 24 months time, and when those mature, the way you put it to use.
Yeah. So like I said, we are defining our role as a central team to be a coach and a player both. Player in small measures on specific projects where we think it is either IP oriented or has a much larger impact. And coach in terms of orchestrating, telling or advising and all. That's what we are doing. So again, going back to that Gartner framework or ways of doing working thinking. So when we do work on some of these projects and they become platform features, then our idea as a coach is to say, now you take it over. Now you make it. Now you have to run it. No, they have to run it. Unless they have also got their ways of working and ways of thinking part in place, they can take the BOT from us. So while it's easy to say, okay, build, operate, transfer, but the transfer requires the talent, the funding, the culture on that end to pick it up and then run with it. And then at some point in time, some of these things will require some rework or upgradation. So unless you have trained them, it's almost while you have given the car, you have to also not just give the manual, but teach and show and say that, okay, when this happens, what do you do? And work and enroll them. So I think that's part of our process, that we want to make sure that the transfer is not just of the tool or technology, but also of the culture represented by the ways of working and ways of thinking. Now the question is, the tool transfer is easy. There's a feature, it's known, you can take transfer of. How do you transfer culture? So what we have done is, in order to demystify or make real those two ideas of which are vague in terms of talent, culture, and ways of thinking, we have in our own teams created some cross-functional squads which are working on creating some institutionalized frameworks of doing it. So for example, this whole stakeholder management framework that I spoke about, that how do you sign up a project? How do they transfer from becoming a project to a platform? How do they get transferred to the business? And when the business takes transfers, they have to also hire the right talent or the right capability. But sometimes we have to help them do it and all of that. So we are creating some frameworks of end-to-end project management, making them run BAU. How do you do quality check? How do you update all of that? So many of these frameworks we are creating through some cross-functional squad internally, which can then be utilized to institutionalize those ideas also. And so almost like a user manual for ways of thinking and ways of working are being created. And that is what they will hopefully take it up and run with.
This episode was all about managing change. While in the previous episode, we talked about aligning the change to the business objectives, this episode, we talked about two crucial points. We first talked about importance of providing insights on the potential of the change, increasing the level of the stakeholders to understand the potential and then look at their own work, relook at their own environments in the context of the change that is being brought in. Only when they understand the full potential can they rethink about their businesses in a different way and then probably leverage the full potential. We also talked about the importance of stakeholder alignment, stakeholder management, and stakeholder engagement and transfer of ownership at all stages of the engagement, so that by the time it goes live, there is no surprises. Change management is a science. While a business transformation, while a technology-led business transformation or a business model-led business transformation has several stages through which it goes through, in parallel, change management is most important to do it. There are structured scientific ways of doing this. It starts with aligning the business objectives, aligning the vision, aligning to the right purpose. It starts with understanding with the readiness of the organization to change. It also needs assessment, the culture of the organization and what is the impact on the culture of the organization. We need to build change champions. We need to build change leaders who then own and then carry this through the different stages. We also need to, at the right appropriate time, align the organization, align the structure, align the people skill, align the people measurement processes, and also ensure the culture is finally aligned to the new transformed environment in which it needs to work on. Only when this is done in parallel do you get the full value of the change you're driving in. I think this is a neglected area. I hope through this podcast, I'm highlighting the importance of bringing this as a critical step in ensuring the investments you are making for any change, whether it's a business change or a technology-led business change, is fully delivered.